story about a brutal series of murders, carried out by a masked assailant in Texarkana in 1946. The killer stalked young couples seeking privacy in isolated areas, where their screams for help would go unanswered. He became known as the Phantom Killer, but to this day, his identity remains a haunting mystery. In 1976, a film titled The Town That Dreaded Sundown, inspired by these gruesome events, was released. Every Halloween, this film is screened in Texarkana as an eerie tribute to the Phantom's lasting legacy of death and blood. Jamie starts to feel increasingly uneasy. Corey notices her discomfort, and suggests they leave if she wants, to which she agrees without hesitation. Shortly after, the two pull up at a secluded park, and begin talking about their future plans, and the colleges they applied to. One thing leads to another, and they start passionately kissing in the car. Suddenly, Jamie is startled when she spots someone lurking by the bushes, staring at them with a cloth mask covering his face. Corey immediately locks all the car doors, and says it's probably just a peeping Tom, and that he won't do anything. The masked man soon disappears. But as the two proceed to leave,
"Get out of the car."
Jamie, stay in the car.
The masked man demands they get out of the car, or he'll harm the girl, and the couple reluctantly complies. The man asks if their parents know where they are, and Corey responds yes, while Jamie reveals that her parents are dead. The masked man then orders Corey to take off his pants and lie face down on the ground. The terrified boy obliges, after which the masked man demands that Jamie turn around. Up next, Jamie notices the shadow of the masked man brutally stabbing Corey in the back, which horrifies her. She then turns around, only to be confronted with the shocking sight of her boyfriend lying motionless and dead. The killer yells at her for looking, so Jamie bolts into the woods in a desperate attempt to save herself. But the psycho eventually catches up to her, and declares, "This is for Mary, make them remember." The scene then returns to the drive-in, where the crowd remains absorbed in the movie, unaware of the horror unfolding nearby. Moments later, a shaken and bloodied Jamie emerges from the woods, before collapsing in front of the audience, so the panicked crowd quickly calls 911. The next morning, Jamie lies in a hospital bed when the local sheriff arrives to take her statement, accompanied by deputies Foster and Tillman. Jamie describes in detail the terrifying events of the previous night, so the sheriff suggests stationing an officer outside her house, which Foster offers to do. The sheriff also asks Jamie not to speak to the press for now, because it could cause widespread panic among the townspeople. Later at home, Jamie and her grandmother watch TV, where news of the previous night's incident is already all over the screen. After crying in the bathtub for a while, Jamie begins researching online about Mary, and discovers that she was the first victim of the Phantom Killer. The scene then cuts to a few days later, where a woman is seen arriving at an airport to meet her soldier boyfriend. The two are visibly excited to reunite and quickly head to a motel to make love. Afterward, the man steps out to get snacks from the vending machine, while the woman prepares a ring to surprise him when he returns. Just then, she hears noises outside the window. And then suddenly, the panicked woman immediately locks herself in the bathroom as the killer violently tries to break in. Desperate, she shatters the bathroom window and jumps out, breaking her leg. The woman forces herself to move and stumbles towards her car, screaming and crying for help. She tries to start her car, but before she can succeed, the killer mercilessly stabs the poor woman multiple times until she eventually falls lifeless. Meanwhile, Jamie is sleeping at home when she suddenly receives a call from Corey's phone, and the killer warns her that he'll do it again and again until she makes them remember. Feeling paranoid, Jamie immediately informs Deputy Foster about this, and insists that if the killer wants to send a message, she must speak to a reporter. But Foster assures her that it won't be necessary, and that he'll personally make sure that it's investigated. Jamie isn't sure why the killer thinks they deserve this, so Foster cryptically reveals that everyone in Texarkana carries some kind of blood on their hands. The next morning, the town learns of the deaths of the soldier and his girlfriend, their bodies found with severe mutilations beyond recognition. With the continuous murders targeted at lovers, the police fear the Phantom is back at work. And so, the panicked townspeople gather for an urgent meeting to discuss the dire situation. many residents suspect the killings are connected to the annual screening of the film The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Hence, they urge the authorities to halt the film's showing and prevent further murders. Caught between facts and speculation, Jamie decides to unearth the truth herself and heads to the City Hall archive. There, she meets a young employee and asks for the documents dating back to the 1940s and 1950s. The guy reveals that all the best stuff is in the prison upstairs and proceeds to take her there. When he asks why she needs these, Jamie responds that she doesn't think they'll find the current Phantom Killer now, unless they discover who he was back then. Shortly after, the two arrive at an archive room containing all the records from 1945 to 1952. The boy then introduces himself as Nick, and reveals that they went to the same high school. But Jamie doesn't seem to recognize him and simply thanks him for his help. After he leaves, Jamie goes through the documents, and carefully studies every detail in the hopes of discovering a link between the decades-old killer and the current one. Upon returning home, Jamie finds a letter addressed to her, which turns out to be an acceptance letter from California State College. But she barely pays it any attention, and opens her laptop to continue her investigation. Soon, Jamie receives a shocking email from the killer, who taunts that they couldn't catch him 66 years ago and never will. He claims that he comes and goes as he pleases, kills as he pleases, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop him. Horrified, Jamie immediately rushes to the police station to inform the officers. Tillman brushes it off, claiming it could be a prank email, but the lead investigator insists they still need to look into it, and urges Jamie to share whatever she knows. Here Jamie reveals that she has been researching old files, and uncovered a man named Benjamin, whom many believe to be the Phantom Killer. It turns out Benjamin was arrested for car theft, and imprisoned for 30 years, during which time the killings finally stopped. Benjamin died last summer, while receiving intensive care at a Fort Worth hospital. Jamie says she spoke with a nurse, who mentioned that Benjamin was often visited by a young man believed to be his son. She theorizes that perhaps the passing of his father triggered something in the son, driving him to come here and finish the job his father left. But Tillman counters with the shocking truth that Benjamin's son died in a bar fight 2 years ago, leaving Jamie stunned. When she returns home, Jamie is surprised to find Nick waiting for her. She introduces him to her grandmother, and Nick reveals that he has brought some additional documents used during the making of the movie. Jamie goes through the papers and, curiously, asks him why he's helping her. Nick then admits that he always wanted to talk to her back in school, but never thought he'd get very far. He mentions that there is a vigil tonight at their school for the recent victims, and invites Jamie to attend. In the evening, the two arrive at their school, where a crowd has gathered with candles to pay their respects to the deceased. Jamie's eyes fall on Corey's picture. They spot the Phantom Killer, so Johnny jumps out of the car and escapes while Roy tries to drive away but crashes. Johnny doesn't get far either, as the Phantom chases him down and knocks him unconscious. Sometime later, Roy awakens, and is horrified to find himself bound and helpless. Nearby, a bloodied Johnny crawls desperately across the ground, right before the Phantom shoots him to death. The psycho then straps a knife to a trombone, and kills Roy by plunging it repeatedly into him, accurately reenacting a horrifying scene from the infamous movie. The next morning, Jamie speaks with Deputy Foster, and asks about the boy who was shot the night before. He explains that the teenager had dressed up as the Phantom, and was trying to get deliberately shot, meaning he wasn't the real killer. Even worse, Foster adds to Jamie's distress by revealing that 2 more lives were claimed by the psycho last night. The news hits Jamie hard, as it means that the killer is still out there. The scene then cuts to a few days later, when Nick meets Jamie, and tells her he has found a man named Charles, whose late father directed the infamous movie. Since Charles still lives in this town, the two decide to visit him in hopes of uncovering some clues. Elsewhere, Deputy Tillman arrives at a local bar, where he strikes up a conversation with a woman, and decides to take her home. Later, they're enjoying themselves at his place, but the fun is cut short when someone suddenly shoots Tillman in the eye. It turns out to be none other than the Phantom, so the poor woman screams in terror as she runs out of the house while being chased. She runs into a vast field, where the killer ends up losing track of her. But moments later, she stumbles upon a scarecrow dressed like the Phantom, causing her to scream. This gives away her location, and the madman brutally slashes her to death. The next morning, a local resident discovers her lifeless body hanging as a scarecrow, which leaves him gripped with fear. On the other hand, Nick and Jamie meet Charles, who reveals that Benjamin was not the phantom killer, and was just a scapegoat to cover up police incompetence. He then tells them about a man named Hank McCready, who was found dead on railroad tracks. Initially, the police believed Hank was the phantom who had taken his own life. But when his wife insisted on an autopsy, it was revealed that he had been stabbed multiple times. It turns out that his wife's name was Mary, which astounds Jamie. Charles thus theorizes that Hank was the last victim of the phantom killer, as a final goodbye before he moved to California. However, the Arkansas police framed Hank as the phantom anyway, while the Texas police framed Benjamin. This left Mary distraught, believing that the town had done an injustice to her husband, and fueling her desire for revenge. Charles confidently claims that the current phantom killer is Hank's grandson, who is still alive, and seeking revenge for the wrongs done to his family. He reveals that he visited Mary before she died, and she whispered to him that her grandson would make Texarkana pay for its sins. Upon hearing this, the duo is shocked because Hank's name is not mentioned anywhere in the documents. Nick thinks it's all made up nonsense, but Jamie believes it could be true since the killer mentioned Mary when she last saw him. When Jamie returns home, she finds her grandma upset, as it turns out the old woman discovered her college acceptance letter. She is worried that Jamie is ruining her life by becoming too involved in the phantom investigation. Grandma thus urges Jamie to pack her things, and insists that they will leave this town before daybreak. Later, Nick learns that Jamie is leaving town and immediately arrives to see her. They decide to make their final moments unforgettable and end up making love that night. Afterwards, they say a heartfelt goodbye before Nick steps out of the house. But he doesn't get far. Shortly after, Jamie and her grandma are about to leave when they come across Foster again. Jamie hands him the file on Hank, and shares the tragic story of the poor man. She suggests that his grandson might be the current killer, so Foster assures her that he will thoroughly investigate the matter. Following this, the two women drive away, but soon stop at a gas station, where Jamie heads inside to buy some coffee, while her grandma stays in the car. However, while paying at the register, Jamie suddenly hears gunshots outside. Her heart drops as she discovers an old man lying dead in a pool of blood. Even worse, her grandma is severely wounded and barely clinging to life. Jamie screams desperately for help, but when the cashier rushes over to help, he is also instantly shot. Aware of the imminent danger, Jamie bolts away, and heads to an old Union train station, where she arms herself with a gun. The killer chases after her, but soon loses her trail. Suddenly, Jamie gets a call from Corey's number, which gives away her location. The panicked girl leaps out of the building, and sprints onto the train tracks, where she freezes in horror at the sight of Nick's lifeless body, with the sign that says forgotten. The girl then rushes into the woods, and crosses a lake, but before she can get out of the water, an arrow strikes her leg. Despite the pain, she pushes through, but it is here that she learns that there's a second phantom, who then strikes her chest with an arrow. This leaves the poor girl helpless, and as she collapses to the ground, the two phantoms approach her. When one of them gets close to her, she removes his mask, and it turns out to be Deputy Foster. The second killer also removes his mask, and Jamie can't believe her eyes when she sees that it's Corey, who apparently faked his own death. Desperate for answers, Jamie asks which one of them is Hank's grandson, and Foster confirms that he is. He expresses gratitude to her, saying that it is because of her that his granddad will finally be remembered. A tearful Jamie asks Corey why he did it, to which he responds that he wanted to be a part of something special, and be remembered as the Phantom. As he delivers a grand speech saying how he's responsible for bringing back Phantom, Foster grows annoyed and, shockingly, shoots him dead. Following this, Foster pins Jamie down, and coldly reveals his plan to frame her and Corey. He will accuse them of being so consumed by the Phantom obsession that Corey faked his death, and Jamie murdered her own grandmother. But before the deranged deputy can finish her off,
Everybody in this town just wants to believe this whole thing is over.
as he collapses on the ground, the girl fires one final fatal shot, finally bringing the town's nightmare to an end. Some time later, Jamie narrates about Texarkana, a town that has two of everything, including 2 sheriffs, 2 mayors, and even 2 phantoms. Since Foster's body was never found, people held different opinions about what really happened to him. An investigation was conducted on how Corey and Foster found each other, but it turns out they had nothing in common, except the darkness within their souls. As for Jamie, she is fulfilling her promise to her grandma, embarking on